Welcome to Across Africa, our weekly roundup of stories from across the continent. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and coming up, with less than 10 months to go until Ivory Coast's presidential election, voters are hoping that, this time around, the exercise will go smoothly. Voting over the last decade or so has been fraught and led to crises and even civil war. Also, a long time in the making, Senegal finally criminalises rape, meaning that abusers will face tougher penalties. But for those who were attacked whilst the offence was still classed as a misdemeanour, the legislative change is a bittersweet one. And the economy versus the ecosystem. Seychelles struggles to encourage growth in its tourism industry whilst also looking after its lush beaches, reefs and nature reserves. We take a closer look. But first, with less than 10 months to go until Ivory Coast presidential elections, voters are hoping that this time around the exercise will go smoothly. Recent elections have led to crises and even civil war. Our correspondents tell us more.
There's fewer than 200 of them, but they're determined to be heard. These young Ivorians have gathered to say aloud no to the prospect of another election marred by violence.
I've seen Bédié in charge, I've seen Bagbo, and I've seen Alassane Ouattara. I know them all, and when they get going, I know they're going to poison the minds of young Ivorians, and it will all start again.
After an arrest warrant was issued for presidential candidate Guillaume Soro and a dozen of his allies were arrested in late December, tensions rose even higher in Ivory Coast. The government denies using the justice system to serve its own needs and accuses Guillaume Soro of wanting to start a coup against the president.
We're addressing the concerns of Ivorians by maintaining democracy, by keeping things calm in Ivory Coast. That's the bottom line. We wouldn't be talking here if there were shots being fired left and right.
With fewer than 10 months to go until the presidential election, the makeup of the Independent Electoral Commission is also already coming in for criticism. The opposition claims it's biased in favour of the ruling party. In the 2010 election, voters didn't believe the results announced by the commission, and the country fell into a violent struggle where over 3,000 died. Many fear the commission is still compromised, which could lead to similar unrest.
The same causes will keep producing the same effects. If we keep the Independent Electoral Commission as it is, we're going to see catastrophic results. We've had post-electoral tensions, but now we're going to have a pre-electoral crisis and a post-electoral crisis. Who will be left in Ivory Coast?
The country's constitution states a 2-term limit for presidents. Another flashpoint would be if the current president tries to stand for a third.
We're still hearing about changes to the constitution. There's even still a question of President Alassane Ouattara standing again. In any case, there are plenty of reasons for people to take to the streets again.
A rerun of the 2010 election is what people fear most. But 10 years on, Ivorians have a different relationship with politics and are perhaps less willing to resort to violence for their politicians.
In Anambra, in southern Nigeria, a young inventor has had a direct impact on his community by creating a hydroelectric generator out of household materials. In a country where most households struggle with unreliable power, innovations like these can make all the difference. Nicolas Chemin tells us more.
Emeka Ugwueze started experimenting with metal and other materials when he was just 5. Now he's 25. In his backyard in the southern Nigerian state of Anambra, he's created a prototype of a generator powered by water. The electricity it generates can last over 6 hours. His goal is to promote clean energy. Some of his machines are powered by high-voltage motorcycle batteries with no carbon emissions. His latest invention is dependent on waste.
What this one actually does is that it transforms trashes, your plastic, nylon, waterproof, and then the rest into petroleum products like petrol, kerosene, diesel, and some other heavy oil.
His neighbour has been using the hydroelectric generator for over a year.
It is very, very excellent. I'm even begging him to, sell for me, but he said that is not possible now. I must even purchase like 5 for myself and my family.
To watch TV or put the light on, many Nigerians have to rely on generators. In all, an estimated 80 million people in the country don't have access to grid power supplies. Emeka hopes he will soon be able to help some of them by selling his innovations and creating jobs for young Nigerians.
Senegalese President Macky Sall has recently signed a decree finally making rape a criminal offence. It previously had been classed as a misdemeanor. The change in the law means that punishment for rape can now be much harsher, but for too many, it comes too late.
This building in Dakar is a refuge for women who have been abused or raped. In 2018, statistics show that 1,321 women were raped in Senegal, but in fact many other victims didn't dare go to the police. This young woman was raped by someone who knew her family very well.
To be sexually assaulted is terrible. And it's even harder when you become pregnant. I was really traumatized. I didn't want to live anymore.
In Senegal, a new law that criminalises rape has just been passed. Until now, it was only an offence with a maximum prison sentence of 10 years. Now, rapists risk spending their whole lives in jail. This lawmaker fought hard for this new legislation.
Women said it had to stop, unanimously. We said this must cease. The president agreed. It's true there were sanctions in the penal code beforehand, but rape had to be criminalized. That's what women were asking for, and now it's done.
Rape had been categorised as an offence in Senegal for the last 55 years. Now it's a crime. Lawmakers hope this will encourage more victims to come forwards and press charges.
Regrettably, heroin use across Africa is on the rise. The drug's often smuggled into Europe from Afghanistan through Eastern Africa. In Burundi, one NGO is trying to help local addicts quit. Nicolas Chemin has more.
Most heroin users are in the Northern Hemisphere, according to the UN, but the drug is also present in Africa, like here in Burundi. In this area of Bujumbura, a young heroin addict told us his story.
I had friends who took heroin. I tried some. Now I'm in the same situation as them. I tried to stop, but I only lasted a month. When I don't have heroin, I have headaches, diarrhea, I vomit, and I have stomach aches.
One local NGO is encouraging young Burundians to quit heroin. It offers AIDS screening tests and psychological help. Its founders stopped using heroin several years ago.
I couldn't stand the suffering. I couldn't stand having to vomit. When you use drugs, you withdraw into yourself. You think you can never go back to your previous self, but it's possible.
The UN says that in the last 20 years, the consumption of heroin has increased in Africa faster than anywhere else in the world. The drug is produced in Afghanistan and traditionally reached Europe via the Balkans. But now, increasingly, the EU says it arrives in Europe after transiting via East Africa.
Now, the Seychelles has attracted a lot of visitors with its picture-perfect beaches, and the islands have gained a reputation as being an idyllic spot for honeymooners. But that reputation pits its economic health against that of its ecosystems.
The Instagram-perfect beaches of the Seychelles just can't help looking like a tourism advert at all times. For many years, holidaying here was seen as a luxury afforded only to a small number. However, reflecting a global trend, this group of 115 islands off the coast of East Africa is seeing visitor numbers climb ever higher. From 2008 to 2018, the number of visitors doubled to 360,000, over 4 times the country's population.
Tourism in Seychelles in general is increasing, and that is of concern to conservationists like myself, to sustainable developers like myself, who find that maybe we're reaching a point which experts call over-tourism.
And yet tourism is a vital part of this nation's economy, accounting for more than 60% of its GDP. The key issue for the government is working out how to maintain this industry without letting it overrun the place. To preserve the status of these islands as a high-end luxury destination, the government introduced a temporary ban in 2015 on the construction of new hotels on the 3 main islands. And on further flung islands, the Seychelles practices a one island, one resort policy, all with the aim of avoiding becoming a mass tourism destination.
Development is kept to a minimum, and that it does not really destroy what we inherited. And for us to keep the waters clean, the marine environment that is teeming with fish, the attractions that are in there, and that people feel very much, that you are in an environment which is still very much intact compared to many other places.
Luxury hotels are among the biggest sources of pollution in the Seychelles. Many import their groceries from abroad and have around-the-clock dependence on oil-powered generators for electricity. This resort, on the island of Silhouette, is taking steps to reduce its environmental impact. For example, a blanket ban on the use of plastic bottles.
In 1 year, we managed to save almost around 400,000 bottles of plastic. So it was the first measure we took by starting to produce our own water, which comes from Mount Duban, our own little mountain, and eventually bottling this water and giving it to our clients complimentary.
The Seychelles Tourism Ministry says it believes the island could ultimately absorb up to around 500,000 tourists per year. Any more than that, and the worry is that the country's vast amounts of protected natural spaces could come under threat.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.